Hello and welcome. My name is Peace Mitchell and I'm co-founder of Women Changing the World Press. Before we begin today, I would like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land that I live and work on, the people of Mamu country in North Queensland. And I would also like to pay my respects to traditional owners and elders right across Australia and the Torres Strait. Well, today I'm very excited to be launching our brand new book, Purpose and Passion. And I have one of my fellow co-authors with me today, Georgina Windebank. Please join me on stage, Georgina.
Hi, Peace. Thanks so much for having me.
It's so wonderful to have you here, Georgina. Now, for people who haven't met you before, I would love you to tell us a bit about you and the work that you do.
Well, I am a qualified naturopath and a holistic sleep consultant for babies and children. I have my own podcast, which won a silver award at the most recent Osmompreneur Awards. I've been doing this work for 5 years, and I think I was drawn to it because I'm not a very good sleeper. And when I had my little boy, I wanted to ensure that he was a fantastic sleeper. And I know the importance of great sleep for the entire family. So I feel like all the professions I had have led me to this amazing one, and I've really crafted it and refined it over the last 5 years. So it works for me, and it definitely works for the babies and toddlers I work with.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Sleep is so important. It's such an important part of our health and well-being and the health and well-being of the whole family. Correct. So, Georgina, your chapter is called From Baby Loss to Business Growth. Can you tell us about this title and your chapter?
Well, I had an interesting journey to motherhood, and I guess a surprising one given I'm a naturopath. I would have thought that once I met my husband and we were trying to have a family, I thought it would have been quite straightforward, but it wasn't to be. And I guess part of the chapter is about the baby loss. We lost 3 babies in this short space of time, but particularly my first little boy, we didn't have, there's miscarriages, I guess, is the most common way to lose a pregnancy. But mine was very, very different. And I found during that experience, it was extremely traumatic. I found that there was no one that had been through this and no one to ask. And I found that the whole situation was shrouded in secrecy and shame. And then when I had tried to share my story in the past, it didn't go very well. It was not welcomed, and it was, I guess, judged. And I went back into my shell for a few more years. I obviously had my living son, and then we ended up miscarrying 2 other babies. But I saw this opportunity, and I really wanted to tell and share my truth, speak my truth about what had actually happened, and not worrying about judgment, and hopefully helping someone else, because there was nothing like Facebook support groups. I didn't have any counselling at the time. And I also lost both my parents in that period of time as well. And parenting and having a pregnancy with my living son when I just lost my mother was an interesting journey. And it's been an interesting journey mothering him and parenting him without any family at all. So that's the grief component, that's the loss component. And I guess it's been an interesting journey to have that experience and then actually work with babies and toddlers. It's been very triggering, but it's actually been incredibly cathartic as well.
Wow, yeah, there's a lot to your story, and I think one of the things that come through for me is the taboo and the silence, and that we don't talk about it. We can't tell anybody that we're pregnant for 12 weeks in case there's a miscarriage, and so much of that silencing around these things that women go through. And then the rate of miscarriage is quite high. It's 1 in 4. And so there's all of these women who don't know anybody else who's gone through it, when actually 1 in 4 is a lot of people who have been through pregnancy loss. And yet, yeah, it's something not talked about. So thank you so much for sharing your story, for telling your story, because I know that your story will resonate with other women. There's lots of different reasons why you might lose a baby and situations, but knowing that you're not alone in that process and that other people have gone through that too can be so reassuring.
Yes.
And confident, I think. Yeah. So in your chapter, they often say that grief changes you. Can you tell us about the lessons that you've learned from grief?
Well, I guess like a lot of people say, grief is not linear. It definitely comes at you when you least expect it. And I remember in the early days, I'd see a pregnancy announcement of a celebrity or in fact someone I knew, and I would just crumble. So I consider myself an extremely resilient person, and this was before all of this trauma as well. So, I guess I've become more resilient, but using those less, I guess one of them is actually being grateful and learning to live with one child. Because the expectation that you have when you grew up, like my mother who's passed, obviously she said, you'll have a boy and a girl, Georgina, you'll have 2 children, just like I did. And she was an only child and she loathed it. She used to say how much she didn't like it. So I had all these messages about having one child and a solo child. And I do talk in the chapter about the stigma and the judgment around that and how I've been faced with that all the time. But there's actually a lot of benefit to having one child. And it's actually taking that and reframing those values and beliefs that you were given to by your family, but living it differently to what my mother lived it, or living differently to what society tells me. They say that solo children are shy. That is absolutely not my experience and absolutely not what we have found. So things like that, embracing what you do have, being thankful for every moment, using those horrible times as fuel to create something profound. And that's why I think it's amazing that I now work with babies, but I lost these 3 babies. To think of where I was and that I didn't think I would be a mother, or I may not have had that, what I wanted more than anything, but have been able to turn that around and create this business, and this work is really profound. And I guess backing yourself too, whether it is in fertility or it is in business, backing yourself when, the doctor said to me after the first horrific loss, he said, it was just bad luck. I said, that's not good enough for my science brain, bad luck. So I really went down a rabbit hole and found out some possible things that might have contributed to his loss. And I fixed all those things naturopathically. And then we were to have a beautiful, robust, healthy boy naturally and have a beautiful experience. So you got to challenge the status quo, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about your strengths in your chapter as well. And one of those strengths is empathy. Can you tell us why you found that empathy is such a superpower and how important this is in the work you do?
Well, I find, obviously, I'm dealing with sleep-deprived mothers and families day in and day out. I haven't had that type of, I was a breastfeeding mother for 12 months and I was exhausted anyway, and I had a sleeping child, but I've been through all these traumatic events. So I know what it's like to go through things on your own. I obviously, again, haven't had a sleep, not like the mothers I work with, but I've had to raise a child without parents. He doesn't have any grandparents. He never did. My husband is in the same boat. So we've raised a child completely on our own, and he is phenomenal. And we've also both built businesses that are thriving. So I think it's important, even though you may not resonate exactly with what someone else is going through, that you use what you've been through, have great empathy for that, and put yourself in their shoes and think about how they would be experiencing life. That's what I wanted when I went through all of this, is someone to empathize and understand what I was going through. But I didn't find that at all. I found quite a lot of insensitivity and judgment, and people not having empathy. So it's really important that we empathize with others, even though we may not have gone through exactly what they are going through.
And with the work that you do, you're working with parents and families. Can you tell us a bit more about that work and how you support families?
Oh, yes. So I guess I've really refined what I do because of my background as a naturopath. I saw the same things happening. So when we work as naturopaths, we treat the core. We look at the underlying factors. We don't just look at the symptoms. We look at the underlying factors as to what's going on. So I kept seeing the same thing with sleep, is that families were grasping for quick fixes, for what product can I have to fix my child's sleep. They're going straight to techniques like cried out of control crying. They're sort of looking at the part quite in isolation rather than looking at the underlying cause. So then over the last 5 years, I've started to construct this way of treating the cause in sleep and identifying it from the foundation. And there are many of those, like obviously what the environment they're sleeping in, what they're wearing, but also the routine. Are they overtired? Are they undertired? Then also connection to their sleep space and connection to their parent. And then there's usually a sleep association that's very strong, like always feeding to sleep, rocking to sleep, hand holding to sleep, whatever it is. And I gradually reduce that ever so slowly. So the process is phenomenal. In the scheme of things, it's really quick, but it's actually really gradual and supportive at the same time. So, I mean, I could talk about that forever. I just love it.
Yeah, I love that holistic approach that you take. It sounds
to
beautiful.
A complete and transformations, that holistic approach, but then transforming not only the baby's sleep, but what it means to the family, like you mentioned before, is completely transformative.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Georgina, and thank you for sharing your chapter in Purpose and Passion as well. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, Peace.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in as well. And make sure you get your copy of Purpose and Passion. You can buy a copy right now at wcwpress.com. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.